All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be. I'm just adjusting my audio levels a little bit here. Yeah, cool. Well, welcome to Code and Coffee, the show where I get in and play around with different dev things. Now, for those of you who are maybe new here, my name is Christopher Harrison. I'm a senior program manager inside of Microsoft Cloud and AI, and I play around with web dev. And so the goal of these streams, the goal of this show, is to get in and play around with various bits of web tech. And you're going to notice that I don't necessarily have any pre-canned demos, that I will connect and start the stream knowing what it is that I want to accomplish, but I haven't laid out a super slick demo or anything like that, because that's not the goal here. The goal is to see, hey, what can we do? Let's kind of learn together, and let's have that experience that a developer has and do that on camera. And I find that this is a really nice way just to get in and explore. And so that's what I'm going to do here. And I also like to highlight the fact that a big part of this is based around chat. So if you have questions as we go through this, please ask. I will absolutely do my best to answer the questions. If you want to say good morning, like I see Alex is already there, has said hi. Hi there. Good to see you. So feel free to say hi, ask questions, and so forth here. That's really what this is all about. So let's go ahead and take a look at my agenda today, at my goals. Just my spikes are a little high. I need to play around with my microphone. I think I want, there we go. Okay, that's a bit better. There we go. Okay, now I can turn that back up, and now I can turn that back up. There we go. Okay, that looks better. Much better. Okay, sorry. See, we're live here. We're doing this for real. So, okay, cool. I think that's about where I want it. I'll keep an eye on it though as we go. Okay, so hi there, John. Good to see you. Good to see you. Okay, so anyway, so you're going to see down below my goals for today. And so what I want to do today is I want to take a Django application and I want to deploy this out to Azure. Now, if you're not already familiar with Django, Django is a fantastic Python web framework that it's built for data-driven web applications. That I have a database, I want to create a front end for that, and this is where Django really shines. That's what Django is built for. And it has a lot of really just neat built-in tooling, built-in APIs, built-in automatic code generation and so forth for us. And it takes care of a lot of the different things that we need to do with this style of application we need to talk to a database, we need to modify data, that we need to display this out to the user, we need to create different forms, we need to set up an admin page to allow internal business users to modify data and all of those different things. And so Django comes with a lot of that functionality built right in. And it then just makes it a fantastic experience for then creating those types of applications. Now, the one little catch to Django is it does an awful lot for you. And so as a result, you're going to notice if you're getting started that there might be a little bit of a learning curve at first. I think it's relatively straightforward once you start getting into it, but there's a little bit of a learning curve. And there's also a fair bit of configuration that needs to take place in order to set things up to make all of that magic happen. And fortunately, this is stuff that you do when you set up the project, it's not something that then becomes a normal part of your day-to-day routine when you're working with Django. So where this is going to become important for us, and why it is that I spent a couple minutes talking about that, is when we go to deploy out our project. So I've got the Django website right here. Let me go ahead and bring up the documentation. And let me go take a look at how we're going to deploy this out. So let me scroll down here and there it is, deployment process. So what you're going to notice is that Django actually has a full deployment checklist of everything that needs to be updated and set inside of Django to make everything work properly on deployment. So there's a fair bit here that we need to walk through, and you'll notice that there's actually a little command line utility that we can use to run some of the checks here to make sure that everything is ready. But at a high level, you're going to notice that there's certain settings that we need to go in and update. That you're going to notice that there's a secret key that we need to move out. You'll notice that there's a debug setting that we want to make sure that we set to false. There's an allowed hosts thing that's going to indicate where it is that we're allowed to return this back from. We can maybe go in and set up caches. There's databases that needs to be updated and so forth. So there's actually a fair bit that needs to happen here in order to get our Django application up and running here. So let's start down this path and see where it is that we need to go. So last week, we took a look at creating our initial Django project. And so right now, if I go ahead and run this, let's say Python manage py run server. And let me go ahead and open this up. What you're going to notice is that this is designed to be a conference site. So we've got our little conference presentations, and it's just right now displaying out a list. So there's not a whole lot to it quite yet, but this is the core of our application. And we also do get, and this is part of Django, this really neat admin site, which I can then use to say add in new presentations, add in new speakers, remove them, and so forth, and otherwise just manage and manipulate my data. So this is the site as it currently sits, and this is what I'm going to want to deploy out. So I need to start updating a handful of things. And fortunately, the bulk of what it is that I need to update is going to be inside of one key file here, inside of my project called settings.py. And as you might imagine, settings.py is going to have the collection of settings for our application. And there's a couple of default settings that Django will set up automatically for you as part of the development process. So for example, let me just scroll on up here. You'll notice that there's three main options here of secret key, debug, and allowed hosts. So first up, let's talk about this secret key. So secret key is used to manage cookie and session security. So basically what that secret key is there for is to ensure that things as they go back and forth between the client and the server haven't been manipulated. And it's also there to help ensure that if somebody is going to modify some data, that they've done so through a form that I have created. Now, you're going to notice here that the secret key is hard-coded into the settings.py file. And the reason that it's hard-coded in as part of the initial setup, that this was not generated by me, this was generated by Django, is really just to try and make things a little bit easier, because pulling this in from like an environmental variable when I'm doing my development work and so forth can be a little bit of a problem. So having that hard-coded for dev, is it necessarily a great practice? No. But is it okay? Yeah, like it's just fine. Like if it's just me running on my own local system and I've got that hard-coded in, that's fine. It's not going to necessarily impact anything if I've got that sitting there. Now, when I go to, say, deploy this out to production, and especially if maybe I'm doing this through GitHub. So I'm posting my code up to GitHub, and then from there, I'm using that to deploy out to wherever it is that I'm deploying out to. Now that becomes, of course, a problem, because that secret key is now going to be in clear text. And your security tip for the day is, generally speaking, posting keys, usernames, passwords, in clear text out to a publicly available website is a bad idea. Just, generally speaking, that's a bad idea. So again, for dev purposes, it's fine. For production purposes, not so much. It's not necessarily the way that we want to go there. The next little item here is debug. So debug is going to give us information about how our application is running behind the scenes. And this is really important when I'm doing debugging, that I want to be able to see what's going on behind the scenes. That way I can figure out where my error is. I can figure out what's gone wrong. But obviously, again, when I deploy this out to production, I don't want debug turned on, because I don't want attackers to get information about how my application is running behind the scenes. The last thing that we have here is our allowed hosts. And our allowed hosts is going to list out the different URLs from which my application can be served. Now, if it's simply an empty array, like you see here, it's going to automatically allow it to run from localhost. But this is not allowed to run from anywhere else unless it's mentioned inside of allowed hosts. So right away, you're going to notice that I've got 3 key settings that I'm going to need to be able to update based on where my application is running. Now, there's a handful of different ways that we could go in and start to manage all of this. And my personal favorite way of doing this is by using a little thing called .env. And if you're not already familiar with .env, this is a pretty common package. I can't think really of a programming language that doesn't have some implementation of .env, and Python is no exception. And what .env will allow you to do is it will allow you to create a new little file called .env, where you then list all of the key value pairs that you want to set up. And these will then automatically become part of your environmental variables. So it makes it relatively straightforward for me then to set all of those different values, have them as environmental variables, so that way when I go to deploy out to production, I can update those values and then pull those in. So it's a nice way for me to offload those settings and do it in such a way that it's like good enough security, as I like to refer to it. That it's not necessarily going to be encrypted. It's not necessarily going to be perfect, but it's certainly going to be better than hard coding those values into your code like you see here. Now, you will notice that there are additional add-ons that you can use that will allow you to encrypt it. You could also, if you really wanted to get full control, you could start to use things like Azure Key Vault to really start to lock things down and so forth. But DotEnv is sort of like it's good enough. So let's start using .env here. Let's get that added in. So inside of my requirements text file, let me add in that library. So let me say python-.env like that. It's not just simply .env. This is something that gets me all the time. It's actually python-.env. So let me add that into my requirements text file, and then let me do a pip install -r and then my requirements text file. Let me there we go. And that will go ahead and now install that .env file. And so now I can, inside of the root of my application, create a brand new .env file. And let me also make sure before I go anywhere else that I set up my gitignore file. So I'm going to go to gitignore.io, which if you're not already familiar with this, it's a wonderful little site that will generate gitignore files for you. That all that you have to do is tell it the frameworks and IDEs that you're using, and it will then generate an appropriate gitignore. So I can say, hey, I'm using Python, I'm using Django, I'm using Visual Studio Code, and I'm using .env. Poof. So I just type all of that out. I hit create, and now it generates that gitignore file for me, which is pretty cool. So now let me just go ahead and copy that, and let's create that real quick. Now, I haven't published this to Git yet, but I'm going to eventually. So I figured let's just go ahead and do that because we want to make sure that our .env file is in fact, oops, that's going to be a folder, .env, boop, there we go. Yeah, so we want to make sure that our .env is in fact going to be listed in gitignore, so we don't accidentally publish this out to GitHub. So there's that. All right, so now let's go ahead and say debug, and let's set that equal to true. Oops. Let's go ahead and say secret key, and I'm going to go ahead and just copy the one that it generated for me. That's going to be just fine. Let me go grab that. Boop. There we go. And then the last thing is going to be my allowed host. And let's set that to localhost. Okay. I think I might need that. We'll do it that way. Okay. So now that I've got that, let's now update our settings.py file to start reading those in. So again, once those are read in, and we'll take a look at how we're going to read them in a minute here, they're going to become available as environmental variables. So let me make sure that we've got our OS library imported. And then now I can go ahead and say os.getEnv, so to get an environmental variable. And then this is going to be my secret key, my debug. What is my, I don't remember how to do this. There's a helper function to do this. I just don't remember what it is. Oh, I know that there's a, there it is. Distutils, okay. And then now I can go ahead and say util string to Boolean, and then now let's go ahead and say os.getEnv and then debug, like that. Okay. So the catch about the .env file and environmental variables in general is that they're always going to be strings. So I needed to convert true to actually be true. And more importantly is I needed to be able to convert false to be false. Guillermo says, legit appreciate you had to Google for syntax. 100%. Any developer that tells you that they don't have to fire up Google to, or Bing in my case, I use Bing, but doesn't have to fire up a search engine to go look up syntax periodically is lying to you. Everybody has to do it. So yeah, so we're really writing code here. Okay, and now let's go ahead and get in my allowed host. So os.getEnv, and then this is going to be my allowed host. Cool. All right. So there is that all set up. All right. Now, let me make sure that that's going to be loaded up here. And I'm going to do this by going into my manage Pi. And inside of the main, I'm going to go ahead and set this up. So I need from .env, import load.env, and then I can just simply say load.env, and then that's it. That I don't need to provide a path here because it will automatically look inside of the root folder. So that's it. So this will now load environmental variables from .env. Okay, cool. So I think I've got everything set up. Let me just double check. Boop, boop, boop. And that looks good. And that looks good. Okay. So let me go ahead and run my server. Let's make sure that it's running locally here. Let's go ahead and bring that up. Cool. That all looks good. And let me just go to my admin page. Okay, cool. Everything is still working. This is exactly what I wanted. So that's the first part here. That's the first part, is to update those different settings. Okay, the next part here is going to, it's going to take a little bit of work. So let me back up here. Let me go back to this to the Django admin site, because this is going to be a perfect example of what it is that we're going to need to do here. So one of the big things about Django is it's primarily focused on generating HTML and the appropriate output dynamically. That it's going to be really built for using templates and building those up and then sending that out the door. That it's not, it doesn't have a built-in production ability to serve out static files. So if I have a static CSS file, if I have static JavaScript files, etc., Django does not have a built-in utility for serving those out. Now, you might be wondering then, okay, well, wait a minute, Christopher. You're saying that, but I'm looking at this page right here. I'm noticing that there's a lot of style here, that obviously it's pulling down CSS files here to work. How is it then that it's doing that if you're saying it doesn't have a built-in ability to serve out static files? Well, it will do this for dev and debug purposes, but it won't do this for production. So for production, I am going to need another utility to make this happen. And the utility that I'm going to need is a little thing called white noise. I can actually just, there we go. So white noise is designed to serve out my static files. Now, there's a couple of lines of configuration that need to be set up to make all of this happen. So let's start the setup process here. So the first thing that I'm going to need is I'm going to need to install this. So let's go ahead and do that. So that's going to be step one. There we go. And let's go to my requirements text file. Okay. Go ahead and do a save. And then now let's go ahead and install that. So that's going to be number one. Number two is I now need to pull that project in. That one very big thing about Django is it will not automatically use libraries or apps or anything else that you've installed unless it's listed inside of installed apps. So I am going to now need to list this inside of installed apps in order to make this available. Now, there's a couple of different ways that I could do this, that I could go ahead and just put that right into here. But unfortunately, there's then a couple of additional steps every time that I wanted to rerun my application locally that would then have to happen in order for me to now do that. So while I could add that here, I don't necessarily want to set that up inside of here. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to actually create a brand new file here that I'm going to call production settings.py. And I'm going to make this now all of my settings file for production. So this is where all my settings for production are going to be. But if we think about this, the bulk of the settings that I'm going to have in here are going to be just fine for both production and dev. Like there's a lot of things here that are going to be just fine. Like I don't need to update every last setting for production. So I don't want to just do a full copy and paste of that settings file. I just need to update certain items here. And so the way that I can do that is I can say from there we go, settings, import everything. So what this will do is this will import all dev settings. And now I can then just override with the production settings as needed. So on that installed apps here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a copy of that and I'm going to bring this over, and now I'll make the appropriate update for my white noise here. Now, I want to actually just link to this right here, only because this has caught me in the past. What I want you to notice here is it says, okay, step one, do the installation. Done. Step two is then to add that into, whoops, the middleware. I was in the wrong spot. Let me make sure that I don't want installed apps, I want middleware. Not a problem. Let's just come back over here, middleware. There we go. Let's grab the right one. There we go. Now, what you're going to notice is that the order here is going to matter. that you'll notice that it says, hey, add white noise to the middleware above all middleware apart from the security middleware. This needs to be there, otherwise it's not going to work. So let me make sure that that's put into the right spot. So again, needs to be right below that middleware. Let me just adjust my tabbing here. There we go. Okay, cool. So now that's set up. I hope that you can't hear. It's funny that they haven't done this in forever, but typically Thursday morning is the morning where they start mowing outside. I hope that that noise is not coming through the microphone here. It's turned really low here. I kind of had a loud voice, so hopefully it's not picking up the lawnmower outside. I apologize if that's coming through. Okay. It doesn't look like it's picking it up. Okay, cool. All right, so now I've got that part added in. And then let's kind of keep it on here. You'll notice that we can even go in and set up compression support. So we can go ahead and set that up. Let's do that. There we go. And now let's see. So now I want white noise with Django. So now that I've done that initial setup, let's go ahead and make sure that everything is configured correctly. So I want my static root to be configured. So again, inside of my settings pie, so it notices it right there. Make sure static files is configured correctly. Let's set up my static root, and let's put that at the bottom here. That all lights up. Cool. And I think that that's it if I remember right. I enabled it. That's good. Add compression. That's good. And then I think that that's basically it. Yeah. And then you could also start to use like a CDN and so forth if you wanted to. Okay, cool. So now I've got all of that set up. And so that's the next big thing. So let's go back to our checklist here. We've kind of been working through this here. So my secret key has been taken care of. That's done. My debug has been done. We did that. Allowed hosts, we took care of that, although I don't have my production set up. Or no, I do have my production set up because I'm pulling that from .env. So that's good. My cache I'm not too worried about. And then the last thing is going to be my my databases. We took care of the static root and all of that. So that part is good. Now it's just our database here. So we need to set up our database. Now, of course, in order to set up my database, I'm going to need things like the name of the server, the connection string, the username, the password, etc. So there's going to be a few things that I'm going to need for this. So I'm going to use a little extension here. Oops. Here we go, called databases. So let me do this real quick. Actually, I can do it this way. VS Code. There we go. Okay. So the Azure Databases extension. So the Azure Databases extension will allow me to create Postgres. It will allow me to create Mongo. It will allow me to create Gremlin. Both Mongo and Gremlin are actually using Cosmos DB behind the scenes, and a few other odds and ends. So it's a really neat little extension that that I can use to manage and work with databases inside of Azure. So I can actually just do this straight from inside of VS Code. So let me go ahead and create my database here. So I'm just going to right click and I'm going to say create server. So this will allow me to create a brand new server. So let me choose Postgres like this. There we go. Let's give this a name, and I'm going to call this Code Coffee Conference, or Django. We'll just do it like that. Django. Hit enter. And then it'll ask me for a username, and I'm going to say Geek Trainer. And then it will ask me for a password. And so I'm a big fan of LastPass. So I'm just going to have this generate a password for me. That looks good. Okay, just copy that and paste that. And let me make sure that I grab that elsewhere as well, just to make sure that I've got it. There we go. Hit enter, confirm, hit enter. And then now it's going to ask about a firewall rule. So whether or not I want to allow myself to be able to connect from here, which I don't, that's going to be fine. So I'm just going to say skip for now. And then now it will go, okay, well, what resource group do you want to use? And so I'm going to call this Code Coffee Django. Hit enter, and then I'm going to put this into, I'm actually going to put this into Central US for reasons I'll discuss later. So there we go. Okay. So what I did there with just a few little steps is I kicked off the process of creating a Postgres server inside of Azure. And so that's now going to be my production database that I suppose theoretically I could just use SQLite, which is what we use for dev. But SQLite is not built for prod. It's built for single user running locally, but multi-user running out on prod. Really not the best option there. Okay. Okay. This is going to take it a minute. I need a real quick break here. So I'm going to be back in 2 minutes here, and then we'll get rolling again. So this is sort of like perfect timing that while that's creating its thing, I'm going to go ahead and just take a real quick 2-minute break, and I'll be back. Okay, cool. I was, that is perfect timing. I could not have set that up any better if I had tried. Perfect. Okay, so it looks like it's now done creating everything, and cool. All right. Alrighty. So let's go take a look at it. Azure Databases. Okay. So what this did here is this now created my my Postgres server. So I can see there's my Code Coffee Django, and it created just one database here called Postgres. So I do need to create an actual database to use. So let me go ahead and say create database. I'm going to call this conference. There we go. And oh, that's funny. I guess I do need to add in my my local firewall. Shucks. That's funny. I did need to set up my local firewall. All right, there we go. Give that a second there to go ahead and create. Still running. Give that just a second. Hope everybody's doing well out there. Chat's been a little quiet this morning. Hopefully you're finding this helpful. Okay, cool. All right, so now that's been set up. So now let's go ahead and create my database. So now let's go ahead, create database, and now I'm going to call this conference. There we go. And now that will create that for me. Chugga, chugga, chugga. Moving your mouse makes it go faster. Perfect. Okay. And so now I can go ahead and right click on this and say copy connection string. And now I've got my connection string. Okay. So let's paste my connection string down below here. And let's start to build this thing up. So what we're going to notice here is if I go into the Django docs, let's go back to the Django docs, and I open up the databases section. What you're going to notice is that for my Postgres, this is the way that it needs to be set up. So it needs to have that as our engine, the name of the database, the username, the password, the host, and then the port number. So it needs all of those settings, and it needs that set up like that. So let me go ahead and paste that in. And now let's go ahead and start reading those in from environmental variables. So for my name, os.getEnv, and this will be username, or better yet, db username. And then let's go, whoops, not username. Don't do that. db name. There we go. It's about to introduce a bug that I didn't want. GetEnv. And then now let's go ahead and say db user. And then let's go ahead on the password, os.getEnv, and then db password. And then on the host, this is going to be os.getEnv, and then db host. Okay, so those are the different values that I need. So my name, my user, my password and my host. So let's go into .env and let's start to set this up. Boop. And db host, db user, db password, db name. So the name of the database. Okay, so I know the name of the database is conference, so I can just set that. The name name of the user is going to be Geek Trainer at, and then code coffee Django. And this is something that is unique to, well, not necessarily unique to, but is required for Azure, that when I'm using an Azure database, the username that you use is always going to be the username at, and then the name of the name of the server. So that's why I've got it like that. The password is going to be the password that we created earlier. So let's do that. And then the host is going to be that. There we go. Okay, cool. All right. So that's now set up inside of my .env. By the way, you can put in comments as well inside of .env. I think, is there not an extension for .env files? Yeah, there we go. Let's get. I'm amazed I didn't have that installed already. There we go. That looks so much better. Okay, cool. So now I can go ahead and say database configuration, and then maybe up here server settings. Okay. Beautiful. All right. So I've got my name, my user, my password, the host. All of that looks good. And yeah. All right. Let's go back to the Django site. Let's make sure. Let's just go back through the checklist here. Let's make sure I've got everything. So I've got the secret key. That's done. I've got debug. That's done. I've got my allowed hosts. That's done. I've got my cache. I don't need that. I've got my database set up. I don't need an email backend. I've got the static files set up. We did that with white noise. And then the media root media URL that I don't need. And then the rest of this is fine. This is just sort of like additional things that you might want. All of that though is just fine. Okay, cool. All righty. So there is all of that set up. So now I need to actually deploy out my, my code. So I'm going to go back to another extension here that I'm going to use my app service extension. So my app service extension will allow me to create and configure and otherwise manage different app services. So I can use this to now create a brand new web app. So let's go ahead and create a brand new web app. So I'm going to choose that option right there. It'll ask me for a globally unique name. So I'm going to say code coffee conference. There we go. Hit enter. It'll ask me for the resource group. And so I'm going to choose the one that I set up earlier, which was that code coffee Django. There we go. It'll ask me for the runtime stack, and I'm going to choose Python 3.8. It'll ask me for a service plan, and I think I'll use that one. Okay, so the service plan is effectively you creating the VM that's going to run in. I had one set up earlier, so I'm just going to grab that. So I don't need anything else there. I don't need application insights, so I'll just skip that. And then now I'll let this go ahead and create. So this is now setting up the web server inside of Azure for my application. And again, moving the mouse makes it go faster. There we go. And so now it says, hey, you created this. Do you want to go ahead and deploy? And as a matter of fact, I do. So let me go ahead and hit deploy. It's then going to go, okay, well, where's your code? That's my CC Django folder. So I'm just going to choose that. And then it will go, hey, do you want to update this? So it will just always deploy to there. I'm going to say yes. And then yes. And now that will do its thing. So now this will go ahead and do the deployment. Now what this is actually doing behind the scenes is what's known as a zip deploy. So it's grabbing all of my code, it is zipping it up, and then it's deploying this out to my application. Oh my goodness. I realized I made a mistake. That's funny. Shucks. I apologize. I can't believe I did this. So, dang it. That was a mistake. The .env file that I created, this is supposed to be for local. This is running locally. Not for production. And I don't know what it was that I was thinking. I'll come back to that in a second here. I don't know what it was I was thinking, but I put some production settings in there. That's not what I wanted. I didn't want them inside of my .env. Let's get that out of there. I don't want that there. Instead, let's just copy all of that there. I want those as environmental variables. Okay. And again, I kind of expected that because it doesn't deploy out that .env file. Although, you know what I can do? Let me do this. I'm actually going to kind of make my life a little easier here. So I didn't want to set this up. This was actually a mistake, but I am going to take advantage of it. That remember with .env. What this is supposed to do is this is supposed to pull in all of those settings as environmental variables, and this is supposed to be running locally. Now, if you've got those settings locally, chances are you are going to want them on production as well. You're just going to want them with different values. And so what's really cool is that if I open up this Code Coffee conference on my application settings, you're going to notice that I can actually just then upload those settings. So I can actually just right click, say upload local settings, and it will go, hey, just point me at a .env file, poof. And then now it will go ahead and upload all of those settings. So I can start to take advantage of that. So Journey with KT, hi there. Nice to see you. All right. So now let me go ahead and get rid of all of this locally. Cool. And so now we can see on our server, all of those values are now uploaded. So all of these are now environmental variables on the server. Now the secret key is currently the same. Let's change that. Let's go ahead and generate a password here. There we go. And let's go ahead and edit that, set that to be the new value. Poof. There we go. And that's now updated. And then on my debug, let's go ahead and set this to false because we want that turned off on production. And then on my allowed host, let's go ahead and edit this to be code coffee conference azureWebsites.net. I think that's right. Let me make sure. I want... So I'm just trying to find the... yeah, I'm going to browse to it. It's gonna feel, there we go. Yeah. codecoffee-conference.azurewebsites.net. Okay, yep. All righty. Let's open that up. Yeah, so let's make sure, yeah, codecoffee, conference, azurewebsites.net. That looks good. And then all of my database settings are correct. All right. Now, the last little thing that I need to do, and this was something that I realized that I forgot, is right down here. So you'll notice that this little line right here, this is going to pull in that settings file. And so right now, this is hard-coded to go look at the main settings file. But that's not what we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to be a to go look to see whether or not we're debugging, and then update this as necessary. So I'm going to say, what am I going to say? I'm going to say there we go. Okay. So what this is going to do is this is going to set the default to running locally. This is going to check to see, are we running in production? And then if we are, load the production settings file. All right. So that's now inside of my Manage Pi. Manage Pi is going to start when my application starts. So that's exactly what I want here. So let me save that. And then now let me go ahead and redeploy this. So I'm just going to go back to Azure. And I'm just going to right click and redeploy. There we go. Now, while this is doing its thing, so zip deploy is a quick and convenient way of doing deployment, that it gives you the ability to just right-click, deploy, and away you go, that it will just zip up all of my local files. It will push them up to the server. But it's not overly robust. That if you noticed on the error message, it warned me saying, hey, this is going to overwrite whatever's there. This is not undoable. So it doesn't give you the ability to say roll back to a prior version. That's something that you can get if you are... That's something you can get if you're using, say, local Git deploy or GitHub deployment or Azure DevOps or something like that. But you're not able to get that with zip deploy. So zip deploy is nice for just a real quick, hey, I want to deploy this. But if you're looking for anything that's going to give you something that's more robust, unfortunately, that's not able to do it. So Scott Shore asks, is the only way to determine if you're in production versus dev to do something like os.getenv debug? And the answer to that is no. First of all, you could go in and set a different value, but you could also go in and look to see if there's another setting that you want to go look at. So maybe you could look at the name of the host that's running your application and determine it that way. Maybe you could look to see if there's a particular file or something like that. So there are other ways that that you can do this. I went with debug just because it was kind of a quick way for me to go in and set that up. But that's not the only way that that you could do that. That there is an environmental variable, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head inside of Azure App Services that will always be set if it's running there. It's something about like the name of the host or something like that. So I could have just read that, looked for that. And if that was there, then great. And if not, away we go. So you could have done it that way. I just went with debug. So no, it's not the only way, but it was a quick and convenient way for me to do that. So, yep. And I did appreciate your little correction of your there. I'm not one of those that would call out mistakes in somebody's grammar, but I do appreciate that you went back and fixed that. Okay, cool. So that deployed. And if I go to my output, I can see everything that went into deploying that out. So I can actually see that it ran the install and everything else. I'm just sort of kind of looking. Just trying to make sure there's no error messages. Okay, cool. All right, that looks good. Okay. Now, I told you at the outset that that there's a lot that goes into setting up that initial deployment. And one thing that I want to make sure that I stress before I get into yet another task that we need to do here is the fact that you don't need to do this constantly, that this is sort of like an initial setup that you have to go through. And then there's obviously going to be little bits of maintenance along the way, but this is not something that you need to do every single time that you need to make a change and redeploy the application. So yes, I know that there's a bit of setup that's going into this, and I apologize for that. But again, I want to make sure that I stress that this is not something that you need to do every single time. Okay. Now let's go ahead and do the last thing. So one of the big things that Azure does, one of the big things that Django does, there we go. One of the big things that Django does is it will give you the ability to manage your database. So it's, again, designed for data-driven applications, and I'm going to need to be able to set up the database for my application. And the way that this is done locally, typically, is off of the manage py file, there's a little option called migrate, and that will take all of your database settings and either update the database, create the database, or just otherwise get it ready. Now, what I did here is I created my database and then I deployed my code out to app services. So I've done those two things. But what I don't yet have is the actual schema of the database. I don't have a user yet inside of the database. So I'm lacking those two things right now. So let me go ahead and run that now on the remote server. And this is another really neat thing about this extension is what I can do is I can right click and I can say SSH into web app. So let me run that and give that just a second here. And there we go, poof. And so now I'm actually SSH'd into the web app, which is pretty slick. So this is now the VM that my application is running in, and so I'm all set and ready to go. Now there are a couple of little things that I do need to do, unfortunately, to get this ready to actually now run. So I need. I'm trying to remember the commands. I may need to go look this up real quick. Actually, I think I'm good here. Okay, I'm going to say pip install tick R requirements text. There we go. Of course, I get an error message about needing to update pip because you always do. But that's fine. So I've now reinstalled Django and everything else that I need. And now I should be able to say Python. I think it's going to be Python. Or no, yeah, I'm just going to be able to say Python manage py run server. Nope. That's not what I wanted. Sorry. Migrate. That's not a good sign. Oh, don't do this to me. I want... Okay, hold on. It's telling me there's no migrations to perform. I don't think that that's true. That makes me nervous. I want to make sure that that's actually the case here. Let me go into my database here. Let me go look at this. It's making me a little bit nervous. I do not believe this. Did you actually run migrate for me on deployment? I don't think that you did. Yeah, you didn't. Okay. So that's not what I want. Yeah, see, because you've got that there, and that's now what you're using. That's not what I want. Yeah, this is making me nervous. Okay, let me. I may need to do a couple of things here. I want browse, open. Okay. All right, it's giving me a 400. That's interesting. I think I know exactly what's going on. What's going to be the easiest way for me to fix this? I know. Okay. Give me 2 seconds here. I'm going to try something here. I want to make sure that you think I misspelled conference in the variables. That's possible. Let me go look at that. If that's what it is, and that'd be fantastic. That would be great. That is very possible. Let's go into my application settings here. Let's take a look here. Oh, look at you. Michelle for the win. Conference. There you go. Let's go look at all of them here. Okay, that's good. Conference. That's fine. That's fine. Okay. Beautiful. All right. Cool. Well done. Gold star for Michelle there. That's awesome. Thank you so much for catching that. You saved me a lot of effort. So hopefully that will resolve this. Let me. Okay, cool. That closed out because that automatically restarted. Let me now reconnect here. So let me SSH back in. Okay. Let's give that a second. And okay. Do my reinstall. Let's see. Dang it. Okay. Well, it fixed one problem. So that's good. But now I've got another problem yet. Oh, okay. All right. We're slowly getting there. Okay. Yeah. See, this is all right. So that fixed one problem. So that's great. So it's still gold star to Michelle. The problem that I had there is that my allowed host was set incorrectly. Okay. Now, the next problem that I'm having, and I've seen this before. Whoops. There we go. Is it's not properly running. This here. It's not properly running my managed Pi. And unfortunately, I've seen this a couple of times on Azure. So I had a feeling that this might come up. So I just need to now do this a different way here. So let me, I'm just going to copy that bit of code and let me just kind of revert back to the way that this initially was. Whoosh. Okay. And now let me go into my settings Pi because I know that this is going to be red. And let's just down at the bottom here, load production settings if running on prod. Okay. So now let's go ahead and boop-a-doo. Are we running on production? So in other words, we're not doing debug. And then if we are, load the appropriate settings. So that would be from let's rename that to production. There we go. Okay. That looks good. All right. So now let's go ahead and save that. And now let's go ahead and redeploy. All right. So the issue that I had there, and I've seen this a couple of times, unfortunately, with Azure, is what's supposed to happen is it's supposed to run this the manage py file, and it's supposed to then have read that setting here, and unfortunately it didn't. And fortunately, I've seen this before, so I kind of expected that this would happen. So now what I'm doing is I'm just putting all of that into settings py, because I know that settings py is running here. In fact, interestingly enough, the proof of that was the bug that that Michelle caught. So cool. All right, now let's try this again. I want Azure. I want you know what else I want? I want to move that up to there. I want to sh. There we go. And do my reinstall. Chugga. And why do you hate me? How do I print an environmental variable? Yeah, come on, just print env. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Oops. Okay. 0 should be false if I remember right. Okay, that's what I thought. All right. Yeah. All right. So if not os.getEnv debug, so that should be false. All right. Why are you not running my settings py file for me? Why do you hate me? Why do you hate me? I want... I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna... forgive me. I'm trying to figure out why this is not running. Oh, ha! I know why that's not running. Actually, no, I don't need .env, but either way, I do need that. All right, why are you not running? Give this a second here. Okay, let's try this one more time here. I'm going to SSHN. Or maybe I'm not. All right, let's try that again. Okay. All right, then you found the DB host. All right, well, that's good. Okay, then let's see if I can't get this to load my environmental variables correctly then. Let's do this. Okay. Let's try it that way. And let's go back to my settings pie, and let's just get rid of that. Let's just try it that way. Maybe this will work. While that's doing its thing, let me on my goals prep the app. That's done. Create my Azure resources. That's done. Debug. I think we can definitely put a check there. Now it's just let's figure out how we can get this to deploy here. Yeah. Okay. All right, come on. Come on. Okay, all right. Anything different is good. All right, this is now at least working. So now it's telling me that it found the host. Okay, so now it's running on production. Cool. So we fixed that issue. Why it wasn't working with the debug setting, I'm not exactly sure, but at least now it's working here. The next thing is there is one last little item that we do need. And let me see if I can't find this real quick. Aha, this is the one that I want. You're the one that I want. And that will now be stuck in everybody's head for the rest of the day. Okay. There we go. All right. There we go. Yeah, there's one last little library that I need to run on Azure. So on Azure, there's also that little library that's needed for Postgres. So I just needed to add that in, and that was something that I just forgot earlier. So let me now go ahead and deploy that. And then away it goes. That's really interesting. I don't know why it wasn't picking up that that debug setting correctly. Why I had to use the DB host. That's a little weird to me. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but at least now it's working. So we're good there. So now I've got my DB host, and then all of that set up. So I don't quite know why that was failing on debug. So, but that's all right. It's now working. Okay. Let me SSH back in, and now things are going to look better. There we go. Cool. Boop. All right. Now, pip3 install our requirements text. Python, manage py, migrate. Ha. Okay. All right, so now the next error message that it's giving me here, and this is an important one, and I'm kind of glad that this came up here, because this is something that comes up with Postgres. So one of the things that Postgres requires is an SSL connection. And it winds up causing a little bit of a challenge with the error message, because anytime that you fail to connect to Postgres on Azure, you're almost always going to get that error message right there, which is please specify SSL options and retry. And that is not what you want. What you need to do is scroll back up earlier in the error message and see what actually went wrong. Typically, it's going to be something with a username and password, or something like that, that actually wound up going sideways. So let me see if I can't find the right error message here. Okay, I'm going to double check all of my environmental variables. Let me, because it's very likely where my problem is. Let's see. So on my DB host, let's make sure that I've got this correct. I'm gonna cheat a little bit here. All right. The DB name. Ah, okay. Nope. Yeah, Postgres.database, and then okay. So let's go in and take a look. So Code Coffee, Django, Postgres, database, Azure. That looks good. Okay. My DB name is conference, and if I go into my databases here, and let's take a look, conference. Okay. And in fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to copy the connection string. Let's just put that into Notepad here so we have it. Okay. And all right. So conference, and I'm gonna just update everything. All right, conference, cool. My DB host, that is going to be the full name of the server. Let me grab that. Okay. Edit, and let's, okay, that looks good. All right. My password. All right. I'm really curious if like any of the percents or things are throwing it off here. I'm going to generate a new password. Let me do this. I'm just going to create a new password for it. Generate, let's get rid of any symbols, and let's do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Azure portal. I'm just going to reset the password here. Let's just make sure that that's not what's causing the problem. Code Coffee Django, and where's my database? My database, and reset password, boop, and boop, and save. Okay, there we go. Can I log into the database directly and make sure the password is working? Not easily. Not easily, unfortunately. Okay, let's do that. Okay, that's now updated. My database user is supposed to be Geek Trainer at codecoffee-Django. Let's just make sure. Codecoffee-Django and Geek Trainer. So let's go ahead and just edit that part. So that, and then Geek Trainer. There we go. Okay, that's good. Debug is set to false. My security key doesn't matter. Okay, cool. All right, there we go. So now let's see this. Let's exit out. Okay, and let's SSH back in. Yeah, Michelle says, used to working with SQL Server, hence the question. Yeah, so what's interesting is for Postgres and for MySQL, both of those require SSL. And it's actually a private certificate that you need to set this up. So what I would actually have to do, I don't even think I have a Postgres client installed on my system, but I'd have to go grab that certificate and then go in and set it up. So it's one of those things where it's just it takes an additional couple of steps to make that happen. Okay. In any event, it's a great question though. Requirements text. Whoops. Manage Pi, migrate. All right. Let's go look at all of my settings here. Do I have a wrong DB host, DB host, DB password, DB password, DB user, DB name, and then let's double check my, yeah, okay. I don't think that should matter, but I'm going to do it anyway. Let's go ahead and just deploy with that. Okay, let's see. Django DB backends PostgreSQL. Yep, that looks good. Okay. I don't need, my host name is, I've actually just got the full thing here. So that's Code Coffee, Django, Postgres. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. All of that looks fine. And then, okay. All of that looks good. Let's see. Let's go back over to my requirements text. That's fine. Okay. All right. Let's SSH in again. Let's try this again. Okay. All right. Hold on. I'm going to try one other thing. If this is what it is, then I'm going to be really upset. I just realized one other thing I may have forgotten. Let me just try this. Please don't let that be it. Please don't let that be it. It's going to be it, though. I know that that's what it's going to be. It works. All right. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this real quick. I'm going to do this. Just because this is going to make it a little easier here to highlight everything. Okay. So here's what we needed on the database. So number one, of course, is we need to create the database. Pretty straightforward. Okay. Number two is then we need to configure the connection string, which I went ahead and did that. The third is this. And this actually holds true with SQL as well. And it's funny because the moment you said SQL, this should have kicked into my brain earlier. Is one of the requirements about Azure is or Azure Databases is they don't allow any connections to it by default. That in order to be able to connect to the database, you need to allow it to connect to the database. So you either need to add in the IP address or that you need to enable, and that's the option that I set right here, Azure to be able to connect to it. And that was the part that I missed is was that right there. I forgot to enable that right there. And that was what, once I figured out the settings issue, that was what then started causing the next set of issues. And unfortunately, there isn't a way through here for me to configure that. And unfortunately, like when you create the database through VS Code, it doesn't flag that automatically. It does not turn that on automatically. And there isn't an option through here to turn that on. So the only way to do that is through the portal, and that's it. So that was the last mistake, was that. And so now what you're going to notice is that now it's migrated, now it's created all of the different settings. And then you'll also notice that if I go back under tables and I hit refresh, oh, that's funny, of course. It's got the wrong password. I don't know how to reset the password here. Let's see. Oh, I can actually just do it this way. There we go. There we go. Whoops, or maybe not. Okay. Anyway, I'm just not going to be able to see it here, but it did in fact create the tables. I'll be able to prove that in a minute here. So it did in fact create the tables there. So we can see all of that being output. And now if I go back and I say Python manage py create super user, now it will allow me to go, oh, okay, give me a username, and I'll put that in, give me an email address, and I can do that. And then on the password, let me, I'm just gonna, there we go. So now that's been created. So now let's browse to my site here. Let's see this in action. So let's go ahead and open this up. Let's do a hard refresh. I may need to restart the server here. Oh, and it's still not running. See, this is, this is what I was saying before, is it sometimes will decide it doesn't want to run manage pi for me. That's the problem that I'm having. This is exactly what I was talking about earlier. This is not running it. Um, this is exactly what it was I was talking about. Is that... Let me redeploy this. See, it's not reading my database settings correctly. There we go. That's what I wanted it to do. Okay. So I just threw this in the bottom of settings pi as now I'm reading this in, and then now it will read in from production. Now it's actually reading in the appropriate settings. So now if I go in and I say admin, now it will allow me to log in, Geek Trainer, and then my password. And now, I can go in and create a brand new presentation. Django is cool. Django is a really cool Python framework. There we go. And now let's go ahead and add in a brand new speaker here. There we go. Email. And now let's go ahead and save that. There we go. And now let's go ahead and hit save. And that's now inside of that Postgres database. And now I can go ahead and view it and see it. So there it all is. So it was a little bit bumpy, but we got there. And the couple of challenges that we wound up running into, first of all, again, is that manage pi is, unfortunately, it's not running manage pi the way that it's supposed to. So that's why I have down here at the very bottom this thing inside of settings to go, hey, are we running in production? If so, then just pull in all of our production settings. So that's why we've got that. So now we've actually finished our deployment there. So yeah, we got there. Oops. Okay, cool. All right. So hopefully along the way, you picked up a couple of tips and tricks about doing the deployment and about setting everything up inside of Azure. Like I highlighted numerous times through here, one nice thing is that while, yes, it does take a little while to set this up initially, after that, you don't have to do this again. So yeah. All right. with that, I'm going to close this off for today. Now that we've got everything up and running, I'm just like, step away, just leave it alone. I am going to, next week though, come back and spend more time on the admin site. That the admin site is one of the best features of Django. And so I want to get in and take a look at that. That will be next week. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. I hope to see you back next week. And yeah, we will talk soon. Bye.